Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Palisha Sthapit, and this presentation is going to be on the recent assignment that we did for the customer satisfaction class. First things first, I had to kind of maneuver the Excel sheet and kind of understand where everything is coming from. It was a very basic Excel sheet that was provided that had a lot of information. We had to look at the complaints, where those complaints are coming from, and our again main focus has been state-wise. Again, the product category where all of these products are coming from, and again a few other things that we had to look at, like the year, the trends, and so on. First things first, the Tableau worksheet, we had to create a lot of sheets for to look at the dashboard. The first thing we did was again extract the data from the Excel sheet. So it was very simple to do that. Just extracted the data, and then again it was combined. We combined the two data to make sure we're extracting all the information required. And as you can see, here's a lot of things that were provided to us. Again, the states being a few more things that were provided to us. So again, a very good beginning, a very good chunk of data to work with. And this is again a challenge that a lot of companies face, to kind of understand what the complaints are and how to manage them and what they can do to solve those problems. So after the data was imported, the first thing was to create the dashboard and the various sheets that we're going to walk through. We're going to spend more time on some than the other, but the basic things were again trying to understand how the whole Tableau worked. There were a lot of things to choose from, and a lot of things that we could move around to understand how everything works. And the basic focus of this presentation is the complaints, right? So the number of complaints was again something that we wanted to work with. And again, as you can see, we have kind of created that into our worksheet, if you will, and we've created the KPIs, the key performance indicators, and we differentiated them depending on what category. One thing that we did for this, or I did for this assignment, was kind of have different product categories. Now, the Excel sheet did provide some categories, but we wanted to again be more specific, kind of consolidate that data into a few items so we could understand how those things were done. If you can see, the first thing that we did was kind of look at the product and kind of understand where all those categories are and how we could work with those. It had again 6 product categories, but as shown in the video that was explaining how to do things, it divided a lot of those into product categories. So just to consolidate that, I again change them into the product group into different categories. So we create the product group right here, if you can see. So the appliances, electronics, healthcare, pet supply, the sports and toys were kind of combined into one. So I kind of created different categories and kind of made the toys and games section under sports. So that really made sure that we were focusing only on 5 KPIs instead of like more. And as you can see, we have other products as well, but this kind of helped us create a little bit more consolidated version of things. So that was the product. And again, this was the KPI that was created. Again, one of the first things that we'll be looking at on our dashboard. This is the total KPI. So what are the exact number of complaints that we're getting, right? So that is another key indicator of how the company is doing, how the complaints are coming in, and what are the important factors for that. Next is again percentage of complaints. This sheet was very, very interesting because we got to kind of color coordinate a little bit, but also kind of understand how to create bar graphs, how everything works, how you can actually categorize things. And this can be a great tool for any company trying to see things from like a visual perspective. And this again in percentages all of these are in percentages in relation to one another. And again, we looked at percentages per year. So this was again very specific to what year did we get how many percentages. So as you can see, this is kind of for all. But if we were just to look at electronics, that kind of gives you the perspective of, that kind of gives you perspective of what different kinds of um, different kinds of categories we're doing for each year. So again, a good way to kind of understand how each category does. And again, this is all the way from 2011 to 2020. So giving you a very good kind of overview of things. And as you can see in the column section has date received. So these are the complaints received in during each date. And it kind of gives you like a track of, okay, we got so and so many complaints for appliances in the year 2011, but we saw that number go down in 2019. So a very good way to see how many complaints are being received each year, like year by year for each category, and again overall as well. So that's a good way to kind of understand how things are working. The next thing is request type. Again, this is another type of graph, if you will, another visual illustration that gives you an idea of how things are. And again, this is very color coordinated to give you an idea. So we can look at appliances and you can see that, oh, we got like 33% of our complaints were 33% of our complaints were from emails, or 33.27 were from website, and 33 were from phone. So it kind of gives you a breakdown of, okay, we are getting complaints, but where are these complaints coming from? It also gives you an insight into what the customer is using to communicate and what the customer uses to kind of reach out to you. So that's a good way to understand your target group, your customer base, and kind of help you segment later if you're trying to reach back out to those customers. So for electronics, you can see it's pretty good, pretty similar. For electronics, you can see email is like a 32%. For healthcare, very similar to, it's kind of very evened out. All of those are very evened out, very 33%. For pet supplies, you can see, again, very similar for each. For sports, again, this is in descending order. So as you can see, the highest is more. So for sports, most of the complaints are coming via emails, and the website, the least is coming from the website. Now, if you want to look at all of it, you can look at all of it as well, and it kind of gives you, so this is like a very, very good representation of how everything is. So this is kind of giving you an idea of what everything is. So the sports, so most of the complaints are from sports, very, very visually apparent, right? The most of the complaints are for sports, and it's leading in each category. Like all of the complaints that in email, website, and phones, majority of those are again coming for sports reasons. And as you can see, the appliances, it's like very less. And overall, we can conclude that, appliances, people don't really have as many complaints appliances wise. So that's a great way to look at things and how everything works. Year trend, again, this is looking at all of it together and how the complaints received has changed over the years, starting all the way from 2011 to 2020. But if you want to focus at one thing at a time, we can look at the appliances again, and you can see that we saw a dip around 2013. We saw another dip at like 2015, but then the trend kind of went up from 2016, and then 2018 it kind of went down. If you look at electronics, you can see very similar. Like after 2018, it kind of dipped. For healthcare, it kind of dipped after 2019. And for pet supply, you can see there was a steep dip from 2018. If you look at sports, very similar from 2018. And then overall, you can see the very steep dip from 2018. So this kind of indicates something. what happened in 2018 that the complaints kind of went down. Did we do good? Or was our customer service really good? So a lot of things to think about, because that has been pretty uniform across all sectors, across all product services. So it kind of gives you an idea of what actually happened in 2018, that this is very accurate for all of those where we've dipped. So again, gives you kind of an understanding of where we did good and what we can do to keep that going. So you can see the complaints kind of went down after 2018. Map. So there's again a lot of categories for each map, and again, we don't want to spend each time because it's very similar, but I'm going to walk through the actual kind of physics behind how all this works. So this is a map, a very interactive map, if you will, that gives you number of complaints for each region, right? So here we can see this is only for appliances, but if you can check for all, you can see that the number has changed for a lot of the regions, depending on if you're selecting all or whatnot, and it kind of gives you this filter where you can pick and choose from. So if you want to get started with the first thing, that is, if you look at Washington, that is the lightest blue, and then you have Michigan, that is very light blue. You have California, Texas, Georgia. So you can see Georgia is leading in everything. So as you can see, the darkest the region is, that means that most number of complaints are coming from that region specifically. So let's kind of understand. So that is a holistic approach as a whole for the entire US, for different regions where the company is operating. But if you were to look at the appliances, you can see the colors have actually changed a lot. In Texas, which was leading, is kind of like very, very light blue, lightest blue you can see here. So for that matter, it kind of gives you an idea of where exactly the regions are leading in complaints. So if you go back to, let's say, electronics, again, that number has changed as well, and you can see how each region is doing individually. We can do the same for healthcare, and as you can see, California and Florida went really, really light, very light blue. So this could be an indicator of why exactly are the complaints not as much from these regions, or why exactly are certain complaints very uprising throughout certain years for certain regions. And pet supply, you can see this is kind of uniform. There's only Pennsylvania that is kind of not as dark, if you will. And if you look at sports, you can see this has been the biggest driver. So if you look at all, you could see how Georgia and Texas were kind of leading in that. And if you look at sports, this could be the indicator that, okay, most of our complaints are coming from sports, and especially in Texas and Georgia, which is something we also noticed during our complaints that we looked at the request type, right? So that is also something that we can look at and kind of compare. Oh, the most of the complaints were for sports, and if you look at here, okay, yeah, it is kind of very evident that most of the complaints are coming from sports, and these are the regions where you need to work on. So Texas, Georgia, and Washington too, for that matter. Washington has been pretty light blue for all the others, but for as soon as we hit sports, it is something that we see has kind of big jump in those complaint numbers. The other ones have been, again, this is the same. We just created different sheets just for making sure we have that reflected on the dashboard, but it's the same thing that we did for all the other categories. Now looking at tile for the same, we can look at how each category is interacting. We can see that it's not very different from what we saw for the map. It's basically the same thing, but just a different illustration of how everything is. So you can see that it has kind of changed overall, and we can kind of change it a bit and kind of see where all of that is. Again, it's the same thing, but in a tile format, if you will. So that was, again, we created the same thing for all of our for all of our tiles and maps. We had individual sheets for that, and it was all for this. It kind of all boils down to this ultimate dashboard. So as you can see, it says customer complaint dashboard. You have select product, so you can select product and kind of see how it changes, and you can change it from map to tile. Looking at the first thing, we can look at the KPIs that we talked about initially, right? The KPIs, which was one of the first sheets we talked about, that has kind of been important here. So this is kind of like a quick look into everything we've discussed so far. We have your KPIs at the very top. You have again appliances, electronics, healthcare, pet supply, and sports. And very, very evidently, the sports is winning. So if we were not to look at everything we've discussed so far, right? This kind of gives you a visual image of what we need to know. So let's just forget we didn't look at any of the sheets. So if you look at just the dashboard by itself, you can see the sports is a leading factor for all of it. Like most of our complaints are coming from the sports factor. Looking at the complaints per year, we discussed that as well. So you can see how the complaints kind of went up, and then you can see after 2018 there was a slight dip, and 2020 it was like the numbers went really, really down, up to 82%. And this could again be due to the pandemic. People didn't really have a lot of things, they were not consuming as much, so they didn't have as many complaints. So you could look at that as well. And as we've discussed for 2018, we did see a big dip after 2018. So that could be again something to reflect on as a company to understand where all of it comes from. Again, this is something we've already talked about, how each of it changes, and this is a great filter. So if I click appliance, all of it changes. If I like hit something else, all of it changes. So this is like a quick way. If instead of looking at one thing at a time as we were, like, okay, what are the complaints? What are the total KPI? What does the map say? What does the yearly trend say? This is just a quick way of kind of understanding. I want to know how the appliances did. So let's just take for appliance, right? We can't go through all of that, but for the sake of time, we can look at appliance. So appliance, you can see how the numbers changed. So for electronics, right, we can see that as well. And then for electronics, it would say there was actually a bit of a jump from 2018 and 2019. So that's one thing that we can kind of see. The overall average, of course, 2019 and up. After 2018, it did go down, but overall, if you look at electronics, it did go up. State-wise, again, we've talked about that, and that map kind of changes. It kind of gives you a reason to look at each region, and you can kind of zoom in and zoom out as needed. So that's a great way to look at it as well. Request type, we already discussed that. It kind of gives you an idea of how everything works. So this is the most interesting part of it. Like, what if you want to look at all of it at once, right? You can do that too. So you can look at the email and be like, sorry, you can look at the all of it at once and be like, okay, this is what we had from the email. This is what it looks like for the yearly trend, and this is what all of it looks like. So overall, this was a great assignment where you could kind of compile the complaints, trying to understand the trends by year, by the year it was received, state-wise, which state is leading in what kind of complaints, what to work on, the yearly trends, and where are all of these complaints coming from. So this is a great way to just look at all of it in a way, and that is it. Thank you very much.